So a few days ago, Robert Baxter and Dexter Tan did a 2-hour-long podcast in which they answered many questions from the fans and also made tons of new announcements. So I thought I would go over some of the highlights that stood out to me and give you a little summary of what exactly they talked about. So let's start with the next East vs West event, which by the way is going to be happening on November 1st at the Swiss Open 2025 tournament. And here Robert announced that there's going to be 12 matches in total for this card. So let's go over some of the matches that we know already and plus talk about some of the new ones that have been announced. So the first match we got to know is between Todd Hutchings and Irakli Zirikashvili, who are finally having their trilogy match so that we can all find out once and for all who is the best between those two. Next up we have Dave Chapey, who is going against Ibrahim Sagov and is going to be fighting for his chance at that 115 kg world title. Then another athlete that was announced was Oleg Petrenko, whose opponent at the moment is still unknown, but as per Dexter and Robert's words, it's gonna be someone pretty interesting. Then we will also have Vitaly, who once again hasn't got his opponent yet, but Robert did mention that they are currently on a lookout and that at the moment there are 2 athletes that they are talking with. Alright, so this is how the card was looking like until this moment, but as I said before, we got some new match announcements, so let's go over them right now. And first, we will start with Gabriela Vasconcelos, who is back already after her dominant performance at East vs West 19, and she is going against none other than the champion herself, Barbora Baisiova. However, this match is gonna be held on the left arm, which honestly could be Gabriela's chance to get her get back. And by the way, they also mentioned that there's gonna be another female match on the card besides Gabriela and Barbora. Then we also have the long-awaited return of Daniel Ustinov, who is coming back after his last performance at East vs West being on November 2nd, 2024. However, until now we still don't know his opponent, but if we believe what Dexter is saying, then it's gonna be someone pretty exciting. Alright, so this is how the next East vs West card is looking so far, but I'm interested to hear what do you think, so leave your thoughts down below. Then we move on to other things that I found pretty interesting, with the first one being a question from a super chat about them possibly hiring Joe Rogan as the announcer for East vs West, to which Dexter answered that they're actually in talks with UFC right now about a possibility that someone from there could come to East vs West to help, and that this deal would come through Dana White himself. Now, while we're on the topic of mainstream media like UFC, let's talk about arm wrestling coming to mainstream, and why do I think it could happen sooner than later? Well, after someone asked a question to Dexter about them possibly choosing Rumble as their streaming service for East vs West, Dexter actually answered that they have already been talking with some of the biggest streaming companies out there, like Netflix, DAZN, and most recently also Kick. So it's safe to say that there is definitely work happening behind the scenes, and I won't be surprised if we see East vs West on one of those platforms next year. Next up, they also talked about the potential opponent for Brian Shaw next, following his very impressive performance at East vs West 19. So the name that was thrown out there was Derek Smith, which in my opinion would be too much for Brian at this moment, which was actually acknowledged by Robert and Dexter themselves later on. Then Robert actually revealed a conversation that he had with Michael Todd recently, in which apparently Michael said that he wants to go down in weight and challenge the holder of 115 kg weight class title. Now this would explain Michael's recent post on Instagram, although I personally think that Michael should stay in the super heavyweights and keep going for that Levon match just a bit longer. And finally, when they were talking about David Samushia, Robert actually mentioned something pretty crazy about Todd Hutchings, with him saying that Todd actually wants to go down to 85 kg weight class, challenge David Samushia for the title, and be the first athlete at East vs West who has held 4 world titles in different weight classes. So yeah, those are all the things that I personally found most interesting in this podcast. However, I do want to mention that there are many other things that I couldn't fit in this video, so if by any chance you have the time to listen to the whole podcast, I would really advise you to, and to make it easier for you, I will leave a link in the description down below.